Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. For 45 years, I've always maintained that the most powerful weapon on the planet is the camera. And that's why documentation has been a very, very important part of all of Sea Shepherd's work. You know, if it's not on camera, it didn't happen. It's the camera provides evidence, it is educational, and it's also our means of self-defense. So photography is probably the most important tool in our efforts to protect the ocean.
Captain Paul Watson, thank you for joining me on Shooting It Raw. It's such an honor, and you will find out through the conversation where your influence has pushed me in my own direction, but this isn't really about me. It's about me opening doors and letting you speak and you telling your story. And what we do is we start off with photographs that you've sent over, and then we go from there. So let's just dive in. In the first photo I have, it's with your hands crossed. You're wearing a Sea Shepherd jacket with it's like a windbreaker jacket. Underneath, you're wearing a black, it could be a sweatshirt or a t-shirt, and behind you is a white background. You've got your shock of white hair. You're looking straight on into the camera. This is just a pretty no-nonsense portrait. There's just a hint of your right eyebrow kind of raised a little bit. And is it adversarial? Maybe it's adversarial. But you're kind of challenging the viewer, and you've got the logo of Sea Shepherd on your jacket. And I mean, I know who you are. I have followed you. I've been inspired by your work for all my life. And so how would you like to frame this conversation, starting with that image where you're just looking dead on at the viewer in this portrait?
I believe that photograph was taken as a promotional photo for Animal Planet's Whale Wars. And so it was a photographer that came to Australia to do that. And yes, what we're saying here really is speaking to the Japanese whalers that we're going to stand firm and steadfast in our efforts to shut down their illegal operations in the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary.
Mm-hmm. So for example, on that campaign, right, we've talked about, or you've mentioned the power of photography. That show, obviously, really brought the message. Already, you had a worldwide following, but that show really seemed to break it into people's consciousness even more. So, in the pose of the photograph, was that from the Animal Planet or the producer who said, "This is kind of what we're imagining how you're going to come off in this portrait? We're facing you. You have to deal with us. We're not going away."
Yes, I believe that they wanted a photograph that showed defiance and determination. So I gave them that pose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, you're Canadian. I find it really interesting that there's this slice of Canadians, something about the Canadian ethos, the value system, connection to the environment, whatever we call it, that, Rob Stewart, for example, was a big champion of shark conservation. And he's originally from Toronto, which is where the nearest shark is like thousands of kilometers away. I grew up in Montreal. Again, the nearest shark is probably a few thousand kilometers away. So what do you think connects Canadians to this environmental awareness and protection? Do you even think it's a thing?
I was born in Toronto, but I was raised in a fishing village in New Brunswick. And when I was young, I moved out to Vancouver, where I became one of the founding members of the Greenpeace Foundation. Now, the interesting thing about it is that the modern environmental activism movement began in Canada. It began with Greenpeace, and out of Canada also emerged the David Suzuki Foundation and Rob Stewart, as you mentioned, and so many other activists have come from Canada. Why is that? I think that in Canada that we enjoy, an incredibly natural environment in a way, more so than other countries. We see what we have, and we also realize what we could lose.
Mm.
We're close to the sea on both coasts, and I had I was fortunate enough to have experienced life both on the Atlantic and on the Pacific. But there's something there. There's something there certainly that motivates a lot of Canadians to become involved on a very, very active level. Not really quite sure what it is, but the reality is there. I mean, there's so many environmental activists who are Canadians. Bob Hunter, Rob Stewart, as you mentioned, Elizabeth May, David Suzuki, some Dr. Paul Spong, so many.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is something that has evolved since the late 60s, and Canada has become a birthplace for activism.
Yeah, I mean, because for example, I remember being, growing up in Montreal, watching The Nature of Things, being inspired by David Suzuki, and then also being aware of the activist protest of actually going and getting in the way of the seal hunts in terms of those images and the forcefulness of actually not being kid glove cotton balls with the message of actually saying, fuck off. Like, no, we have to stop. Like, we have to stop on a much, much smaller scale. After being in Hong Kong for a little while, just a couple of years, I realized Hong Kong is ground zero of the shark trade. And I thought, well, if I can make a difference here, that might actually have an impact beyond. And so when I started Shark Rescue, the gold standard I had was Sea Shepherd, who says, we are actually not going to be convenient. We're not going to be polite. We're going to get in your face and we're going to say, no, stop. Why are you, what's in the ingredients of your brain? Why did it manifest in this way because Canadians are known for being very polite and very respectful of the other and all this stuff. Yet why is it that when it comes to this, there's a bravery that is so clear and attractive to people that you attract people from around the world? So can you explain why do you think you have that guts to do that, to do what you do? Because anybody who's seen the show will quickly see that you guys are just incredible.
Well, personally, I don't think Canadians are that polite. I think that's a mythology. Canadians are very outspoken, especially when they're passionate about something. Farley Mowat example is a good example. I mean, he took on the government over the wolves. He wasn't afraid to say what he meant and to say it forcefully.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's sort of really a myth. I think that Canadians are probably less fearful of their government than, say, Americans are and many Europeans.
Okay.
And that, I think, also lends a lot of strength in that. I mean, we dare to speak out against the government because, for the most part, again, it's a myth that Canadians absolutely respect their government. I don't believe that's true either.
Mm-hmm.
We do not only speak out against the government, but we physically intervene against the policies of the government, whether that be the seal hunt or logging or fish farms or fur industry or pollution, so many things that we speak out against the government. We're not afraid to do so. We don't have to worry about repressive backlash that you would see, for instance, if you're opposing, pipelines in the United States, and that states is far more authoritarian in that respect.
Right.
Of course, so we're also dealing with a different type of government. Bob Hunter used to describe the Canadian government as fascism with velvet gloves. In other words, it's there, but it's hidden. What's the difference between Trudeau and Donald Trump? Not much, really, except that probably Trump was more honest than Trudeau. I mean, Trudeau's the darling of the environmental movement, and yet he's pro-pipeline, pro-tar sands, pro-oil tankers, pro-seal hunt, pro all of this stuff. And yet, but he's got this reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So Canadians speak through that mythology and speak truth to power in that respect.
There are voices out there who will speak truth to power. and who do not fear or go away from the uncomfortable conversations. And so you're one of these people who very easily, like just now, you very easily say things that I think other people might find a little bit confrontational, controversial, or upsetting. How do you feel about the fact that you may offend people in the audience?
I'm not really concerned about offending people. I mean, my clients are not people. I represent the all of those species that live in the ocean. From phytoplankton to the great whales. So those are my concerns. Back in 1986, when we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet and destroyed their whale processing plant and shut down their industry for 17 years, I was approached by a former colleague in Greenpeace who said to me, what you did in Iceland was reprehensible, unforgivable, and you're an embarrassment to the entire movement. And I said, well, so? He says, I think you should know what people think about what you did. I said, John, I don't care. Didn't sink those whaling ships for you. Didn't sink them for Greenpeace. Didn't sink them for any human being on the planet. We sank them for the whales, John. Mm-hmm. Find me one whale that disagreed with what we did, and I promise you we won't do it again.
Mm-hmm. What I like is about the clarity of your message and the forcefulness of it. And I understand that some people are going to be like, no, whoa, you're going to be a little bit like like in the spectrum, you have WWF, and then you have like Friends of the Earth, and you have Greenpeace, and then you are on the side of the spectrum of PETA and other ones that I think make people feel uncomfortable. And I love how you're just like, well, who cares? I'm not here to please an audience. I'm here to make the point of, for example, saving the whales. Let's just say there's a normal distribution of people, right? So most people are going to, like, let's say 80% of the people are going to be like, well, in the middle of the road. But you need to have that 10% on the extreme that, like you and other people who are going to be very forceful and sort of clear about the message. Do you think that small population can be increased, or do you think that it will always be like a kind of a fringe notion?
The history of humanity has demonstrated that every single significant social change that has ever happened has been carried out with less than 10% of the population. Mm-hmm. The other 9% just go along. They go with the winner. Whoever triumphs, they go along with. So, whether it be the abolition of slavery or the women's rights movement, the would give women the vote, or the civil rights movement, all of these things were carried out by a minority of very outspoken and activists. Mm-hmm. And every single revolution in history has been the same. As Margaret Mead once said, don't expect governments or corporations to solve any social problem. They never have, and they never will. Governments cause problems. They don't solve problems. All change comes through the passion of individuals, the passion, the courage, and the imagination of individuals or groups of individuals. That's what makes change. So I think it's my duty as a conservationist to rock the boat, to piss people off, to make them think. I'm not really concerned about what people think about me. I think it was Oscar Wilde said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. Mm-hmm. We're here to provoke thought. Yeah. And we do that through action.
As somebody who's also aware and conscious of personal branding, so in my day job, I do leadership training and that kind of consulting stuff. And one of the great consistent things about how you come out into the world, I was hoping to have images that you yourself made. And I learned that, well, this isn't really how you want to go into the world, showing the sort of the more personal side. And so, for example, the images of you on a ship, it is all very dark. Okay, so you're essentially standing on the left side of the image, and you're standing on like a kind of a gangway, and it's all black metal and wood. There's the ocean behind you and a white sky, not many clouds. The one bit of color is a life preserver in yellow. Next to it is maybe a buoy, which is in the fluorescent orange. It's just, and then you're standing, I guess, in khakis or something, in a white shirt, and there's your hair in the wind, and it's the full-on Captain Paul Watson out at sea, in a way, it's an icon, like just like the other image of you with Sea Shepherd, just looking straight on at the viewer. In this image, describe the day that that image was made.
I believe that's a photograph by Joanne MacArthur. Here's the thing. I don't take pictures myself. I don't do video. It's not my talent, and I'm not going to pretend to be so. Certainly delegate that position to numerous skilled and wonderful photographers, whether that be Gary Stokes or Joanne MacArthur or Rob Stewart or so many others that have come with us. Barbara Vegas, another one. They're the ones who do that job, and they do it well. And so I would never even presume to compete with that kind of talent. So I've never actually taken a photograph of anything, but I certainly do put photographers in a position to capture images, not of myself really, but capture images of the actions, of the campaigns, of our client.
I think every time you say campaigns, I hear a bell. Okay, so I've spent the past, 13 to 15 years working with a very successful business person who helped build a global service network, right? And so we really looked at the ingredients of leadership and how to separate leadership from management. And in terms of your development as a leader on your ships, right? So let's go back to the early days of when you decided I'm going to form Sea Shepherd. It is a reflection and a representation of the founder, of your spirit. And I think that's what people really connect to Sea Shepherd. So describe how those early days evolved. The decision to say, you know what, I'm gonna go with this alone maybe, or I'm going to venture off and start something new, put onto the world with a new kind of message. So can you go back to those days and try to reaccess those feelings of how that came about and what triggered that evolution?
Well, you do what you have to do. One of the most valuable lessons that I ever learned was in 1973 during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota by the American Indian Movement. I had volunteered for the American Indian Movement to be a medic during that occupation. And we were surrounded by about 3,000 federal troops who were shooting at us, 20,000 rounds a night. They wounded 46, killed 2.
Oh, wow.
I went to Russell Means, who is the leader of the American Indian Movement. And I said, look, the odds are against us. We have no hope of winning. Why are we here? And he said something that stayed with me forever, which is that he said, well, we're not worried about the odds against us, and we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're here because it's the right thing to do, the right place to do it, and the right time to do it. He said, don't worry about the future. Focus on the present. Everything you do in the present will define what the future will be. And so that's what I've done ever since. I don't worry about the future. I've always focused on the present. What can I do in the now? What I started as an organization is now a movement. It's beyond my control, and that's great. That's what I always wanted, the evolution of an organization into a global movement. And one of the things, my sort of brand of leadership, I guess, is to delegate, positions into authority and that. On ships, we run our ships by chain of command. As captain, I only speak to the chief officer, the chief cook, and the chief engineer, and they carry on those relay those orders down along the line. That's how the ships are run. With the Sea Shepherd today, what I do is basically nothing in regard to that. The directors run their countries, the captains run their ships, and I'm available really for advice, but I don't give orders. And that's is what made us successful as a movement. Many years ago, Bob Hunter said, look, when you get power, just let it go. Don't hold on to it. And that's the only thing you can really do.
So if we're to think of Sea Shepherd as a kind of this emerging, visualize something like the roots of a tree or the branches of a tree, that with each year, each branch gets thicker. Some of them become trunks. Some of them give the branch off to create other sub-branches and all this stuff. And part of the movement of it is that it becomes a much wider network, right? So, like, how expansive is Sea Shepherd right now? And what about the vision of where it will go and how it will be?
It'll be what it'll be. I don't really concern myself, again, to the future. It's growing, it's evolving as a movement. Sea Shepherd today is under the direction of its directors, like Lamia Samlami runs operations in France, Jeff Hansen in Australia, Mike Lowry in New Zealand. We're in Italy, we're in Germany, we're in 42 different various nations, and it's all running. I can't even keep track of the campaign that we're doing right now. There's so many of them, and that's good. That's what I'd like.
Yeah.
But the other thing that too is anytime a movement or an organization or a movement grows, there's always going to be dissent within that. People who want to see it go in a different direction or want to do something else. And what we've done with that is, instead of fighting with people like that, we simply assist them in going in another direction. And sometimes that opposition there's an animosity, and sometimes it's just friendly. It's just a disagreement of where we need to go. Back in when 1979, I had a crew member who wanted to get involved with protecting animals in laboratories. He wanted to stop cruelty to animals in laboratories. I said, well, we can't do that. This is Sea Shepherd. I said, but if you're so passionate about it, why don't you do something about it yourself? And he said, well, what do I do? I said, use your imagination. Do something. So he went back to the U.S., got a job in a laboratory, exposed all of the stuff that was happening there, the cruelty, took it to the Washington Post and to the TV networks, closed down the laboratory, and then he established an organization called the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which came out of our crew members. Right now, Pia Klemp, she is the captain of the Banksy vessel, which is rescuing refugees in the Mediterranean. That was where her passion was going.
Yeah.
Gary Stokes actually, was a photographer with Sea Shepherd, and now is running animals, Oceans Asia, and there's so many examples of people wanting to do this. I mean, Rob Stewart was involved with Sea Shepherd. That's how his first campaign began filming sharks on board a Sea Shepherd vessel and everything. So we encourage people to go there, to follow their heart, to follow their passion, and to do so within the context of their abilities. And I think that works out quite well.
Yeah, the track record is really amazing.
Because what we do is not everybody's cup of tea. What is Sea Shepherd? Sea Shepherd is an anti-poaching organization. We don't protest, we intervene. That's what we do. If people want to do something in another vein, then we certainly encourage that. But we are consistent with what our approach is, and that is interception against illegal activities. We have always operated within the boundaries of both practicality and the law. So after 43 years, we've never been convicted of a felony, and we've never injured or anybody, nor have we ever sustained any injuries.
That's definitely something that I had Gary on the podcast, and that's one thing he was very clear about. Is like he really thought that it was the perfect tension, I guess, between doing what is lawful, but also what is necessary to stop what is unethical and highly immoral in many cases. So when was there something like I would call a happy accident where you couldn't have expected a really positive outcome that just out of the blue that you would have never been able to anticipate emerged, and that was obviously related to your energy and your work? So can you think of a time that you had, basically a happy accident?
I think that it's an evolution of experiences. When I was 10 years old, I spent the summer swimming with a family of beavers, and the next summer when I went back, they were all gone. I found that trappers had taken them all, and that made me quite angry. That winter, I began to walk the trap lines and to destroy the traps and to free the animals. Then later in 1975, on the first Greenpeace campaign to protect the whales, I was in a situation where a whale could have taken my life. And I could see that the whale understood what we were trying to do, and the effort he made to not come down and crash upon our vessel. And when I looked into the eye of that dying whale, and what I saw there really changed my life. Not only did I see understanding, but I also saw pity. Not for us that we could take life so unthinkingly, without any compassion at all. And I said to myself, why? why are these whales being killed? The Russians were killing sperm whales not to eat, but for oil, spermaceti oil and sperm oil. And that was highly prized, especially in the munitions industry, where they were making intercontinental ballistic missiles using spermaceti oil as a high heat-resistant oil. And I said, here we are killing this incredibly beautiful, socially complex, self-aware, intelligent creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me, as a species, we're insane. And from that moment on, I said, look, I don't do this for people. I do it for them. I do this for all the creatures in the sea. And that's what motivates me today. I look at this planet as a spaceship, which is what it is.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, we're a spaceship going around the Milky Way galaxy in this incredible voyage at incredible speeds. And every spaceship has a life support system. And that life support system provides us with the air we breathe, regulates climate and temperature, provides the food we eat. And that life support system is run by a crew of Earthlings, all of those species that make it possible. Not our humans. We're a bunch of passengers having a wonderful time, amusing ourselves. But what we are doing is murdering crew members. We're killing them. Only so many crew members you can kill before the machinery begins to fall apart and is no longer capable of supporting life. So really, if we kill off the crew members, we kill ourselves. That's why I say all the time, the ocean dies, we all die.
No, of course.
If phytoplankton disappears today, we no longer exist. Phytoplankton provides 70% of the oxygen that we breathe. And I don't think people even think about that. And the reason they don't think about it is because we're all involved in this collective form of mass psychosis called anthropocentrism. Where
Hold on, Paul.
What?
The thing. Okay, look. Part of, I think, the magic of this podcast works when you and I converse and exchange, like around a fireside chat, right? And with all due respect, and this is with all due respect. Let's move on to the next photograph, because when I was really inspired, the thing that motivated me and that gave me that energy and drive wasn't necessarily information. It was like that emotional trigger, right? And so what I'm trying to get is to create that expression of of what resonates in you to hopefully resonate in other people. And it's true that when you speak, what you say is just dead on, like it's really sharp. So let's go to the third image, which is you standing again. It's like very monochromatic in a way, like it's black and white and grays, and the color is in your skin ultimately, and you're standing outside of a door, which is, I guess, the office of Sea Shepherd. Now, is this in Canada or is this in another one of your cities?
It's probably in Vermont. We only have one office in the U.S.
In Vermont, of all places.
Yeah, that's where I live.
Oh, wow. Why Vermont, of all places?
Well, it's a nice place to live up here in the mountains. Got good weather. You don't have to worry about forest fires, earthquakes, typhoons, hurricanes, whatever. So it's just where I happen to be. I can't go to Canada because I'm not allowed in Canada.
How do you feel about the tides of politics that, in a way, have turned Canada away from you when you are actually one of Canada's real greatest champions? Canada
does not like anybody that does what I do, including David Suzuki or Parley Mowat or anybody else. We're not very popular.
But you have a more welcome home in the U.S.?
Well, back in 1986, I had somebody from Revenue Canada came to me, and they stripped away Sea Shepherd's tax-deductible status. And for this reason, he said, are you opposed to the killing of seals on the East Coast? I said, yes. Are you aware that the Canadian government supports that? I said, yes. He says, are you aware that that is now an uncharitable activity? You cannot disagree with the policies of the Canadian government to retain your tax status. And then he went through a few other things like that. And I figured, well, I can't, there's no longer an environment where I can actually work. So the U.S., we have a tax deductible status as we do in most other countries except Canada. So, I have more freedom to grow in the United States. I'd rather deal with the U.S. courts than the Canadian courts, but
okay.
That's just the reality of it. Canada also took the tax status away from Greenpeace. They tried to take the tax status away from David Suzuki Foundation. David actually had to resign from the foundation in order for them to keep that foundation because they said that David's speeches were political. The Canadian government is very, very oppressive when it comes to activists, and do so in a way that, again, like in Canada, you got such a wonderful government in Canada. That's because you don't live in Canada. That's what I always say.
The flip side of I find of the Canadian psyche is passive aggressiveness that you don't really find in other places. And so I can totally understand why you'd say, well, at least I can do my thing in the U.S. within the limits of the law. Okay, well that's shameful. That is totally shameful.
Well, it was Mordecai Richler one time who said that if you want to make it as a Canadian, you better make it in England or the United States first, because nobody takes you seriously unless you do.
Okay, so you're a force to be reckoned with just in conversation. You're so sharp. And so what is your relationship at this point to Sea Shepherd?
Well, I think that used to be the case, but now we have a lot of leaders, a lot of captains who are good speakers, and that I still do most of the writing, really. But, again, it's delegating that over to as many people as possible. The CEO, I guess, of Sea Shepherd today is Alex Cornelissen, who is Captain Cornelissen, who's based in Amsterdam. Captain Peter Hammerstead is in charge of our African campaigns and our Latin American campaigns. So this is working out really quite well that way. And, there's no way that one person can actually manage all of this. And I certainly don't believe in micromanagement. So I think that the evolution of Sea Shepherd from an organization to a movement has worked out really well.
One half of the spirit of this podcast is the idea that every second is a gift. We are just voyagers on this incredible spaceship. You have a 15-year-old who looks and is thinking, okay, I want to do something. So what can you say to any of those people to say, okay, look, this is what you can actively do?
No, you find out what you're passionate about and then follow that passion by harnessing your skills and your ability to both the virtues of courage and imagination. You can change the age. In fact, younger people are probably far more passionate about these things. I mean, look what Greta Thunberg has been able to accomplish. People have an intuitive understanding. And what our educational systems do is they beat that intuition out of us. So what I say to young people, I don't tell young people anything. I try to encourage their intuition and their imagination.
With regard to marine ocean conservation, what would you say right now is a pressing concern?
Diminishment of species is far more of a threat than climate change. In fact, it's one of the contributors to climate change. And what we're seeing right now is a massive diminishment of species and ecosystems, marine ecosystems, and also a diminishment of species on land and terrestrial ecosystems. This is a cause for a lot of concern. The world is rapidly changing, and we're fabricating those changes through our behavior. Right now, for instance, we're involved with this COVID-19 virus. And, since 1995, I've been predicting that this is going to get worse and worse. Because why do you have these emerging zoonotic transmission of viruses? Because of the destruction of ecosystems and the diminishment of species. And as these species are diminished, the viruses associated with those species need somewhere to go, and we're a very attractive host. So since 1995, you've seen the rise of Ebola and SARS and MERS and West Nile and Zika and AIDS and all these things like this, even before. And all of this is because of what we're doing to this planet. And now, added to zoonotic transmission of viruses, you've got emerging pathogens coming out of the permafrost. I mean, a couple of years ago, Siberia, 200,000 a year were killed by anthrax from a pathogen that emerged from the permafrost. We are creating a situation where we're rapidly becoming aliens on our own planet. That is, that we might not be able, this planet might not be able to support us. And we'll be walking around on the Earth with spacesuits.
Here's what's interesting to me is fundamentally what you're demanding is a balance between human behavior and our place within the biosphere as a part of it, as not as above or separate to it. So
Yeah.
How often have you heard the accusation that you, Captain Paul Watson, are a deeply committed humanist? That one of your major concerns is to help humanity find its place, to get its act together?
Well, I'm just saying that unless human beings learn to live in harmony with all other species, that we're not going to survive. That basic laws of ecology, the law of diversity, the strength of an ecosystem lies within diversity within it, the law of interdependence, that all of those species are interdependent with each other, and the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth, a limit to carrying capacity. And what we're doing is we're stealing the carrying capacity from other species, which results in diminishment of both interdependence and diversity. And that's not going to lead to anything that any world that we're going to be able to live in.
If there is a kind of joyful leadership in your own life, what in there brings a smile to your face or a sense of deep satisfaction?
What gives me the most joy is being out with nature, whether that be on the ocean or my favorite place in the world is Antarctica, or being in the mountains. It doesn't really matter. I take great pleasure in seeing other species. I take great pleasure in just seeing the natural world for being what it is. And it also motivates me to do everything I can to see that that's not destroyed. One of the problems that we have with humanity is our ability to adapt to diminishment, that we just keep accepting less and less and less. And I don't want people to get what we have. Stop just accepting that it's going to be less. I mean, look how much we accept and we don't even think about it. 1965, the very idea, if I were to tell you that in 40 years' time you'd be buying water in plastic bottles and paying more for that water than the same amount of gasoline, you would have looked at me like I'm crazy. Nobody's going to do that. And yet here we are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one message I like to get across to people is, just stop accepting diminishment.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything you would like to say to fuel the emerging undiscovered Greta Thunberg out there who's just waiting to come out and step forward? Because it takes a certain courage, or it takes a certain spark or catalyst. So what kind of catalyst or spark would you put out into the world to try to encourage that?
I think everybody should understand that each and every one of us has the power to make a difference. And all we have to do is harness that passion that we have for whatever it is that we're passionate about to courage and imagination. Because of Diane Fossey, we still have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Wingate, the Bermuda storm petrel did not go extinct. So many examples of how one individual has changed the world for the better. And I can't think of a more noble cause than because you live, a species didn't go extinct or an ecosystem wasn't destroyed. That's far more noble than anything else I can think of fighting. When people join the Sea Shepherd, the one question I ask when they want to join the crew is, I said, are you prepared to risk your life to protect a whale? And when people say, well, that's asking a lot, I said, why is that asking a lot? We ask young people all the time to risk their life to kill people over property, real estate, oil, or religion. I think it's a far more noble thing to take that risk to protect an endangered species or to prevent the extinction of a species. Mm-hmm. But again, society, an anthropocentric society where we don't really take into account the concerns of non-humans and how important they are to our own survival. We don't live in a planet without bees or whales or trees. We need them. They don't need us.
100%. Paul Watson, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, give my best to Gary if you talk.
Oh, for sure. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.